Hi everyone, I'm Luke Hector and you're watching The Broken Meeple. This is a YouTube channel about board games where I give reviews, top 10s and my honest opinions, regardless of the consequences. We'll get on with the show in just a minute, but first a quick word from my sponsor. As a fellow gamer, you'll understand this is unacceptable. The solution? Head down to my new sponsor, KIENDA.co.uk. KIENDA stocks many of the hot new releases as well as some old hidden gems. Free delivery on orders over £30, further discounts on bulk purchases, and even 5% of your spending refunded back to you as points to be used for further discounts down the line. If you use the referral link in the description below and sign up for a new account, you'll get 5% discount on your first order over £60. So let's make gaps in your collection a thing of the past. Get down to KIENDA and start saving today. Thank you for listening and enjoy the rest of the video.
Get on with it.
So this is a rather special best and worst of the month, because normally I would be doing best and worst of November, but I'm kind of combining it a little bit with December, because for the rest of this month I don't expect to be playing anything new that I haven't already got to review or will have reviewed. So next month would kind of just not be on the cards. But I do have some games here that I've played during November and December to this day where they are new and I want to give some thoughts. So I thought I'm going to combine this kind of as a threesome in a sense. It's kind of best and worst of November, it's best and worst of December with newer games, but also this is kind of like my rest of Essen episode, because I have done so many reviews for Essen. I am starting to get a little bit burned out on the things because I've had to do so many of them and I haven't even been able to do as many as I can. I mean, I've still got to do Scholars of the South Tigris preferably before the end of the year, or maybe that'll have to wait till New Year, we'll see. September, I haven't even managed to actually play the wretched game, so that's like going to take me a little while. So there are a couple that have sort of slipped the net, and there's still a couple of like older games like Iki, Planetarium, Fantastic Factories I got over there, you know, that I've sort of managed to acquire by way of like raffles and events and stuff, and I haven't even played them. So Lord knows what I'm going to do with after this stuff. So I thought this is basically going to cover November, December, and what I haven't done for Essen. So you can see there's a few Essen titles here like Pirates of Maracaibo, Ring Circus, Lucky First Incense, Freaky Frogs, Shadow House Masquerade, and I just thought, you know what, let's just cover them all in one episode. I can't do reviews for every single one of these, so I figured let's just get them out of the way. Hey, wouldn't that be right? So, okay, let's start, you know what, let's just go from top down, okay? Top down, smallest down to lowest. So this is from Emperor S4. This is Shadow House Masquerade. Thanks for the copy. This is a tiny little game, as you can see, and I do like Emperor S4 for coming up with these really interesting little, like, quirky light card games. You know, not all of them sort of blow my mind, although Hanamakoji is still one of my favorite two-player games, so, you know, that one's definitely worth grabbing, and the slightly more serious Geisha's Road, that sort of upgraded from it, is, again, really, really good. I just think Hanamakoji is probably the slightly better one just because of its simplicity. It's even on Board Game Arena now, apparently. Well, this is apparently a social deduction game that you can play in about 15 minutes. 3 to 8 players, 15 minutes, scales with all of them, and it's like, okay, I'm interested. I mean, it's been a while since I played a social deduction game, but very simply, and not to explain much, is basically there is a culprit amongst you, and you are basically just trying to avoid capture. Everybody has dealt a selection of these little cards here, which allow you to do some weird effect, like, you know, just, you know, pass a card to the player on your left, ask somebody if they're the culprit, lie about being the culprit, you know, ask players to close their eyes except for the person who's the culprit, you know, stuff like that. And it essentially plays like this little mini chaotic social deduction game. Everybody's got 4 cards to begin with. The deck is tailored based on player count, although the cards will be random, so you won't necessarily see all the effects in there. And it kind of plays out like, a bit like if you took Love Letter and, you know, where is Love Letter? It must be downstairs. But if you took Love Letter and made it into a social deduction game, more so than it, because I mean, Love Letter is not really social deduction. Yeah, you can guess who's the guard and whether someone's the princess, but there's only so much social deduction in it. Well, take the Love Letter formula and maybe add just a little bit more of that social deduction nature to it, and you essentially get Shadow House Masquerade. The gameplay's fine, and honestly, you know, the artwork is quite cool with this kind of like old sort of silhouetted, you know, decorative thing, a bit like something you would probably see on like the start of a Pink Panther. If I was playing this game and I looked at these pictures, I would constantly get the Pink Panther theme in my head, I think, just because it kind of looks like that sort of like setting. But you know, it's quite cool, it's easy to play, and yeah, it does the job. I mean, it's not going to blow your mind, but it does what it says on the tin. It gives you a social deduction experience in about 15 minutes with fairly easy rules and a little bit of chaos. It is meant to be a little fun party game in a small box, and it doesn't deliver anything more than that, but, you know, I enjoyed it. It's fine. I might even hang on to this one and sort of see how it goes with a few other groups. But yeah, 3 to 8 players in 15 minutes. It's not bad when you literally just want something nice and quick to do. So yeah, Shadow House Masquerade, probably a 7 out of 10 for this one. Give it a shot, nice and cheap. Alrighty, Freaky Frogs in Outer Space. It's almost, it sounds like one of those old like cartoon series, a bit like Biker Mice on Mars or something. It's like kind of weird. Although it does have really like funky, cool artwork with the sort of like the toads and spaceships are like, yay, you know, it's quite cutesy and weird fun. But this is basically, I don't know if it's a present or just a dumping or whatever. I don't know. Paul Grogan basically gave me this at GridCon.
Here, take him. What are you waiting for? A kiss goodbye?
This is basically a pinball card game, and I've already given my thoughts on Super Skill Pinball downstairs. Super Skill Pinball is a decent pinball game. You've got different tables, you roll dice, you've got a bit of mitigation, it plays out with a very thematic touch to it. It's a roll and write, basically. The only problem with Super Skill Pinball is that it does take a while to finish each game, so I figured, okay, this could be a quicker one, because essentially you have one table, and that's it. It is literally just a table and a bunch of cards with the odd little token that likes to escape. But if I get a bunch of these things out, it is built to a budget. I mean, it is a cheap game, but you are basically using a paper board, so this is the table, there's no other.
I feel like I'm gonna break this damn thing.
If you want the crazy busy version, you can have that with all the artwork on it. But essentially what happens is it's beat your own score, you play with 3 balls effectively, and the cards are what dictate everything. You draw a hand of 5 cards, you've got a hand limit of 7, and they basically have flippers and the bumpers and the letters and the things that you knock out on the typical pinball table. But the idea is that when you play these cards, they might let you draw more cards, but following the traditional thing of a pinball table, if you are playing a letter, right, I'll play the G in frogs. Okay, cool. It now travels to the next section. Right, well, what can I play that's on the next section? Well, I've got a bumper, play a bumper. Whoop, play a bumper there. Right, draw 2 more cards. I've got another bumper of a different colour and a flipper. Alright, well, okay, I'll hit the other bumper. Fine. Okay, what can I do? Well, I can hit the letter again. I haven't got any letters. But I can start on the letters for ray gun down below. And it's basically that you've got to manage your hand and like try and get as many points as you can by lighting up the letters, getting multi-ball and all that stuff. But the cards dictate what you can do, and there are some negative cards in here, which when you draw 2 or 3 of them, they're different types, you have kind of like a last-ditch effort to kind of save the ball before it goes out. It's quicker than Super Skill Pinball for sure. I mean, it is really short, but what, like 25 minutes for a game? It is probably half the length it takes to play Super Skill Pinball. So that's its positives over that game, and it's also slightly more portable. The downside of this over Super Skill Pinball, though, is that if you thought Super Skill Pinball relied on a lot of luck, that one does have a little bit of dice mitigation, though, and some like quirky things you can do to try and keep stuff going. But yeah, if you thought that game was lucky, well, this is very lucky. I mean, this is meant to be a quick solo-only game that you can play in about half an hour and have a bit of fun with like, a full pinball session. It's pretty hard to do well unless you get very lucky with these cards, and that's the problem. You're drawing cards from a face-down deck, hoping you get what you need, and you could be searching for like the last letter in frogs or searching for the last one in ray gun before you can actually trigger the multi-ball, that kind of thing, and the cards just might not come up. There is an auto-save thing that on the first turn you can get rid of a starting bad hand, but once that's done, you're kind of at the mercy of these cards, and it takes quite a lot to set up things like multi-ball or these big point multipliers. So you can play a game of this where nothing just goes your way, the ball just comes down and then it's like, well, I didn't draw any flipper cards. Oh well, I lose that ball then, and that doesn't feel quite so fun when the deck basically hoses you more than anything else. It's fine, it's a fine game, and I suppose for a solo-only game for 25 minutes, it's not meant to be a skillful, you know, recreation. I mean, it's pinball. Pinball is mostly luck anyway. It does feel like this one is maybe a little bit too lucky for my liking. I do wish that maybe there was a little bit more mitigation with the cards, but it is half the length of Super Skill Pinball. So I can see why I would kind of like to play this one just to have a quickie 25-minute game. I'll hang on to it. It's a small little box. You know, and I think Super Skill Pinball is the superior pinball game. This is still just nice, quirky, cheap, and with some funky little froggy artwork. That's it if you're into frogs.
You big...
Alright, quickie, Dwarf King. I am a trick-taking fan. I like trick-taking games, and I'm always down for trying more. I am so annoyed I couldn't get Nikosu dice at Essen. That is annoying. I really want that game. But the Dwarf King was one that I grabbed recently because it came out on sale again as a reprint. Because I'd heard Sam Healy and a few others in old day Dice Tower, back when they had the great trio, talk about this game, and I was like, okay, I'm intrigued. A game where the rules and how you score points change each round. Okay, fine. And that's basically what Dwarf King is. It is trick-taking in every way, shape, or form. Like you get dealt the suits, numbers, ace, king, queen, jack, or whatever. Some funky artwork, a couple of special cards. But the main thing is that a player gets to choose out of these multitude of tiles a special rule for the game. So, for example, most victories, plus 1 point for each trick. Okay, fine. Bad numbers. Add up the values from 1 to 11 of your cards, minus 5 points for the one with the highest total. Okay, cool. Capture the kings. Get a 3 points for a king, minus 3 for a queen. So they add some quirky scoring rule to each round, and then you play a typical trick-taking game with the same rules as any trick-taker. I'm not going to go into detail. I think by now most people know what a trick-taking game is. And it basically is that. Now, I like the quirky rules system. The only problem I do have with this one is that it does go on a bit long. I mean, I played a 3-player game of this, and it still took ages to finish the game, like nearly an hour to finish it. It says 40 minutes on the box, and I think for what is meant to be a quirky trick-taking game, it's a bit too long for what it is. I can play certain other trick-takers that are better than this one in the same amount of space of time, possibly even less. I mean, hell, there's actually one that is not on the pile there. I need to go fetch it. I'll fetch it while the camera battery dies on me in a second. That, I think, was better for a shorter space of time. This one, I think, just outstays its welcome, so a little bit disappointing. I mean, it's nice, it's a funky little game, but for it to take that long with just 3 players, I mean, how's it going to take much less time with 4 or 5 players? I just feel like this one could just drag on, and for what is basically trick-taking with a special rule, I was kind of expecting it to be a little bit more nippy, but it's fine. I'm glad I tried it, but I don't think this is a trick-taker that I'll be hanging on to.
3 weeks later.
Well, in the time it took me to find the one game I was after, I found another 2 that I was meant to put on this table. So, yeah, we're going to talk about a lot of games this episode, okay? So let's start with the one that I was referring to a second ago, the other trick-taking game I've played. This was, I forget who recommended this one to me. I can't think it was a viewer or a friend of mine, but, somebody has said, oh, you like trick-taking games. Have you considered Tricky Badger? Never heard of it. Never heard of it. Would have glossed past this in the initial list for Essen because I would have looked at the name and just gone, what? And just thought, whatever, a little card game. But they said, go grab it. And it was only €10. So I thought, you know what? Let's grab it. It's a little trick taker. This is actually not a bad little trick taker, actually. I've enjoyed it. It takes about the same amount of time to play as, say, Dwarf King. But there's definitely more to it. The idea is that you play through each round, I think 5 or so rounds. I forget how many rounds it is. But the idea is that, yes, you are playing a standard trick-taking game, so you have suits of cards and they've got the numbers, but there's a couple of little quirks. Firstly, some of these numbers will trample other numbers. So, you might have this, a 1 card, but then it might trample something, you might have like a 5 card and it tramples a 1 automatically, so it gets cut out to the running. You're probably thinking, well, hang on a minute, it's higher, so why doesn't it automatically win? Well, the idea is that each round you have a selection of these collection cards out, which score in different ways. You've got badgers, you've got the little hamsters, you've got sticks, you've got beetles, you've got food seed, you've got cages, that kind of thing, little birds. And the idea is that they're laid face up, and each hand somebody chooses one of the cards that they're going to basically fight over. That's what the tricks are for. But these cards dictate whether you need the highest card in the trick or the lowest card in the trick. So stuff that tramples other cards becomes more of an importance in that sense. But the idea is that they score in weird little ways. So the sticks, worthless unless you can get 5 of them, in which case they're each worth 2 points. Hamsters, they're a point each, great, and if you can get male and female together, then you make a little couple, a bit like an Everdell, and they're worth extra points. Alright, fine, but you got to be careful with badgers, because badgers are worth 3 points apiece, but the problem is badgers eat all your hamsters, so therefore, if you've got any hamsters and you take a badger, whoops, they're gone. You've got sort of beetles and seeds, which add extra points when you pair them with the gerbils because they effectively eat them, but there are limitations. You've got cages that protect badgers from being nicked, or protect hamsters from being eaten, that kind of thing. It's just a few little quirky things like that. Birds, they can eat seeds of other players, or they can nick bones and sticks off other players. So there's a few little cool quirks like that. But that's essentially the game. You play through a few rounds, and at the end of the game, you score the most points. But the idea that you've got all those collection cards on view at the start of a round, so you know what's potentially available, and you just go around clockwise. So once they've picked a card, it's like, well, you know what? I think I've got a good hand here to win that stick, and I need that because I've got 4 of them already. I want to score points. I don't think anybody else is gunning for them. So you know what? I'm going to go for this stick, and you won't use all the collection cards. I don't think in a round. Some of them will be left over, so you need to get it out if you're going to use it. So you're not going to use them all. It's just a quirky little trick taker game, and you know, the theme is funny. I mean, the idea that you're protecting little cutie hamsters from, you know, the big badger, but you know, some of you might not care about hamsters because you've got enough badgers. Fine, they're worth a decent amount of points. You know, I might have avoided hamsters the entire game and just grabbed a bunch of sticks. You know, that's so cool. The stick strategy seems a little bit on the powerful side, because if one of you is gunning for sticks and another player and all the other players aren't, then unless they're willing to try and nick the sticks off you just to not have them be, you know, give you loads of points, but it gives them a negative point, which is not much incentive, you know, the person who just goes solely for sticks can kind of just pull away because everybody else is fighting each other for hamsters and, you know, badgers. That's kind of one thing I've noticed, but it's a bit like the science in Seven Wonders. You got to tell people don't let one person get all the science. Well, you got to tell people don't let one person get all the sticks in this one. But other than that, I found this to be a quirky little trick taker. It's fun, it's simple, it's got very nice, you know, cutesy artwork, eco-friendly game if you're into that. Designed in the Netherlands, Jolly Dutch production, which I don't know much about, you know, made in Poland. So yeah, this is a cool little trick taker. I'm gonna hang on to this one. Tricky Badger. All right, Christmas tree. This is one from Taiwan Board Design, and you know, they always give me a few things. One thing I don't like, I hate these like tuck boxes. I mean, this one is already damaged to high heaven and that. If I can get one of those little photo card cases that I can stick this in, I think I will, because it is just a pain to have to unwrap these. But the idea is, and as you can see, these are very small cards, but it's called Christmas Tree, and I think it's a reprint of a game that came out a while ago, which was also called Christmas Tree, so I think this is just another implementation. 2 to 5 players, about 15-20 minutes, and that is pretty short. The idea is that these cards are laid out in kind of a Christmas tree fashion. I'm not going to recreate it entirely here, because I'm not particularly good at, you know, recreating Christmas trees, but they're essentially, it's basically like a big pyramid. And the idea with this is that you can pick any of the rows you like and take all the cards into your hand, but every row that you skip, you have to place a card down. So it's a bit like in Small World and as I guess did Century Spice Road have that? Maybe, and certainly Majesty for the Realm had that. You know, the one where you can go further down the line, but you got to spend in order to get it. Same thing here, and what you put down is important because you can kind of remember what everybody else is gunning for. So it's like, well, I don't want to put down a snowman because if I do that, then he's going to take it. He's going to take that with all of this lot. Don't know if that's a good thing. So it's one of those, almost a bit like Abyss Conspiracy. I want to take cool stuff, but I don't want to give everybody else the chance to get loads of cool stuff as well. And when you've got a set of, I think, 3 or more of them, you can essentially play them out and score points based on how big the set is. But there's a little catch. When you play a set of a particular type, if anybody else has got a certain amount of those types in their hand, they have to get rid of one of them. And it's like, okay, that's a little bit problematic. In fact, it's even worse than that, actually. Yeah, others discard half of that scoring die. So it's not just one, it's half of what they've got. So if somebody else is gunning for the same thing as you might want to get yours played ahead of time. It may be worth less points, but if you're worried that they're going to suddenly play it and make you lose half of yours, you might want to do that earlier on than later. Very tight scoring. I mean, you're talking like, you know, 5 points being a typical maximum for the game. It really is like quite tricky to win with like a large score. So I think this is going to be very tight, but it's very simple. It's good for the Christmas season. I mean, we're in December after all. Very simple artwork. The cards are decent enough quality for the price you pay, because it is a very cheap game. I mean, less than a tenner. And other than the fact that I wish it came in a better box, this is just a nice little quirky game. It's a filler, does the trick in, you know, 15-20 minutes for 2 to 5 players. Probably better with, say, 3-ish players. I think 3 is a good sweet spot, sort of meet in the middle, because 5 just gets a little bit chaotic with everything, 4 a little bit less chaotic, and so forth. 3 just seemed to be the sweet spot, but 4 can work well just as fine. 2's a nice little back and forth. 5's just maybe a bit too many. But yeah, it's just nice, cool. I just wish it came in a better box, because this is not the way to store cards. Hey. I know. I mean, it's built to a budget. You got to deal with it. But hopefully I will find something else to put it in. But I like it. And I must admit, saying that I haven't been given ratings for the ones in the past. I mean, Freaky Frogs, probably give that one a 6, 7 out of 10. That would be fine. Dwarf King, I was a little bit disappointed. I'd probably give it a 5 out of 10. It's average. I don't think too much of it. Tricky Badger, 7 out of 10. I quite enjoyed it. I thought it was good. And this one, Christmas Tree, 7 out of 10. I would give that one a pretty solid rating as well. Right, Felicity Cat in the Sack. This is not a recent game. This is a fairly oldish game, but it recently came back into print, and I'd heard again people talk about this one on critic channels, and I thought, you know what? It's a filler game. Let's go for it. It's got a funky little theme. It's got cute cat's faces on the thing. I love cats. Let's go for it. Freedom and Freeze, who's featured with Freaky Frogs earlier. But this one is kind of like an auction bluffing game. The idea is that there are a certain amount of sacks laid out. And you're trying to basically, there's a sack and different money cards laid out. You are effectively trying to win the sack at the end of the day, preferably with a lot of really good high point scoring cards in it. And the idea is that everybody has a set of similar cards, so they're the same for each player. And they consist of cats with positive and negative values, a couple of bunnies with no value, a couple of dogs with various abilities to like chase away certain cats.
I think not, baby puppy.
But the idea is that everybody at the start, in clockwise order, puts a card down in front of one of these. I'm going to use the front of the table just for it. So green might do this, black, blue, yellow, and red. Here we go. So each one's got a card from their hand in front of one of these cards here at the front. The sack and money choices. And the first one gets revealed. So it's like, ooh, a 15-point cat in this one. Great. Then people start bidding with these in order to effectively progress to the next card. Now, whatever money you decide to spend after winning a card, you will spend. But if you pull out, then you'll get your money back. Fine. But there's another incentive, because when somebody pulls out of the auction, the next card is revealed. Oh my god, 30 points for this one. This is totally random. 30 points. This is an insanely good sack so far. And if you pull out under one of these money cards, you effectively get that money back. So you can kind of boost up your income in that way. But the idea is that you kind of bluffing a little bit as to what cards you've put in the auction, particularly if one of yours hasn't been revealed yet. And so everybody's got a little bit of information that other players don't, except for whoever goes first. But then the person who went first won the previous card, so they got to be at that disadvantage. And so you carry on. How the hell did I get 3 15s in a row? How the hell did that happen? This was totally randomized. For 45 points. Okay, hang on a minute. I must have put all the 15s at the bottom or something, because that is just... that doesn't make sense.
That's not a superpower.
Yeah, it is.
No, it isn't.
Yes, it is.
No, it isn't.
Yeah, it is.
No, it isn't.
Oh, good. Something that isn't a 15, for crying out loud. So this would basically be a game-winning sack if somebody won it. But you might have, like, a couple of really good 15s in there, but somebody has snuck in, say, the large dog. And if the large dog's in there, chases away the highest point-scoring cat, so bye-bye 15 points. But then if both dogs are there, they kind of play with each other, and therefore they have no effect. So there's a couple of little, like, chaotic things like that. But it's just a very quick, cool little bluffy game where people just get into it, they have a bit of a laugh. It's that whole bluffing thing of like, did you not? Because everybody has the same cards and they're finite. So when people have played them, they're face up in that, so, or put down in like columns and that. So you don't necessarily know exactly what people have played, but you can kind of remember, well, hang on, I think you've already played your dogs this game, I'm not sure. It's tricky to remember that, but it's a fun little light card game. You don't need to take it too seriously. The only problem I had with it was that if you get caught on the back foot, like if you gamble in a particular round and you spend a ton of money and it turns out to be a rubbish sack, but then trying to pull back from that is damn near impossible. You just won't have enough money compared to the rest of the other players to actually be able to win any more cards. You'll just be slightly scuppered. So you really do have to be careful not to put everything into a sack if it's going to potentially like balls you up, or you just have to be prepared that you are literally going for broke here. But yeah, other than that other little problem, this is a cool game and it works very well for 5 players. Not many games work at 5 players. This is one of them that does. So if I need a filler for 5, this is definitely one that is in the bag quite often and pulled out. It's just a good bit of a laugh, and funky little theme, easy rules to teach, doesn't take very long. I mean, what's it say on the box? 20 minutes? Yeah, 20 minutes to half an hour to be more exact, but still, it does its job as a cutesy little filler. I'd give it an 8 out of 10. It's a great filler. I just think that it could have been higher rating if it didn't have that sort of problem with the, being at the back means you're kind of screwed thing, because you're kind of just going through the motions at that point. But otherwise, I enjoyed this one. I'm just glad I picked this one up. Right, next up. Whew, God, this is going to take a while. Lucky First Incense. Not a lot to say about this one. Taiwan board design again. This is kind of a I don't know, push your luck semi-bluffing card game, but I like the premise it's based on. It's basically, as far as I recall, it's a setting in like Asia where people queue up for the hope that they're going to be the first one to light these incense sticks at the temples and that, and it's sort of like a little bit chaotic where everybody is mad to try and get there first, before anybody else. Kind of like the Asian spiritistic version of Black Friday, I guess. But the idea with this is that this is the card game of it, and it even explains with photographs at the start of the book about the setting and why it's there. So cool, I mean, you've picked an interesting theme there. But the idea with this, and I had to download the rules because I've got the Asian rules here, I don't have the English rules. But you lay out these palace boards, and everybody's got a collection of cards, which are the same for each player, and they basically consist of various characters with different number ratings and different abilities. On these boards, you have one round where it's the temples, and then the next round, which is the palace. So everybody queues up at the temple and then races to the palace afterwards. The idea is that some of them you have to place face up, some you have to place face down, depending where it is, and then they're revealed. And then much in that kind of single elimination tournament setting where like two get paired off, one goes forward, then plays against another one goes forward, that kind of thing. You basically find out who gets to the top of each section. You get points based on who gets highest, but the characters, when they're flipped, aren't just simply ratings. I mean, some of them have funky abilities like, can swap other cards, or knock out other cards, or tie with other cards, or, the cat eliminates another card, evil cat. The ancestor possesses another card, which is kind of weird. I mean, what is it? Ghost? Your ghost of your ancestor turns up and possesses a character to boost it or nerf it. That's kind of weird, but yeah, fair enough. And and that's kind of the game, really. There are advanced rules where you can throw in these special abilities that you can trigger sort of once in a round, which are quite nice, and they vary. There's quite a few of them in the box. I mean, quite a few of these different sensor tokens, and I've got a slightly deluxeified version where you can have these ones like on little standees and stuff. It's not overly necessary, you can just use the cards, but it's got a decent amount of production quality in here. I just wish I'd got the English rules with it, but that's only a minor beef because on Board Game Geek they exist. And the game is kind of what it says on the tin, really. It's there's not a huge amount of bluffing you can do. I mean, you can kind of be wary that someone's like, oh, I don't know if you've put that character there, but then there's only so much information you have. It's more kind of like a press your luck, a bit of a laugh, see who gets to the end, get a few points and done and dusted. It does not take long at all. I mean, this is done and dusted in about 20 minutes. So, to give it props, it's in a small box and it takes very little time at all. And it does the job. I didn't go mad for this one. I would have maybe liked a little bit more control over what I'm doing with these characters. It is kind of very chaotic, so you just have to accept it's one of those types of games. I'd probably give it a 6 overall. It's fine. It does the job and it will kill 20 minutes nicely. Good production, a fun little theme, cool setting, but maybe I would have just liked a little bit more agency with what I was doing, although I will say it does improve with the advanced rules where you use those special abilities because they can throw things up for a notch and everybody knows they're there, but you can also use the Incense to, instead of triggering one of those, to boost one of your other characters, so you do have a little bit of flexibility. But yeah, it's nice, cute little filler, but I gotta give it props for picking a very unique theme that is based on actual fact and, running with it. It's quite a nice little idea. 3 more games. Free Ring Circus. This is another Devier game. By now you would have already seen the review of the White Castle, I believe, has already gone up, and I've given my thoughts on that. Well, I was going to do a review on this one, but I just haven't got the time, and I just figured, you know what, let's just cover it in a big compilation video, because, well, we'll get onto that in a minute. Free Ring Circus is essentially based around a free ring circus. There is a board with area control, and the idea is, I don't want to get everything out of the box, maybe just the cards, but the idea is that you are building up a board with 3 rows of cards on it, and these cards essentially consist of these different artists. So you've got different versions. You've got money ones, which are like the basic acts that you can also sell off the card for money, but you've also got the various different acts like acrobatics, animals and stuff like that, where they have different number ratings and they come in different types. When you acquire them, they go on one of the 3 rows on your board and they cover up symbols which might nerf you in certain areas or give you bonuses. but they arrange strictly from ascending order, so the lowest at the left and the highest at the right, no matter what. And they have various effects at the bottom which allow you to score points or improve your acts and stuff like that based on various scoring conditions. But the whole game mainly revolves around grabbing these cards, getting them on your free rows, and a slight bit of area control where around the board you are effectively going to the various cities and doing the shows. Small, medium and large. Small gets you money, medium gets you more acts, large gets you a decent amount of points. But all the while this little caravan is going around the outside as a timer to see when the game is going to end, and it will skip over shows that have already been done, so you can kind of accelerate the timer a little bit by planning where you're going to do your next show. And of course everybody else is doing it, so there's a little bit of competition with other players. I've played this multiplayer and solo, and I'm just not seeing much of it from it. It's not a bad game, but it just felt a little cold, like a cold experience, because the theme is not even here really. You're just putting cards in a sequence and seeing what points they do. So the whole circus thing is literally there for some nice artwork and production design, but that's it. And I do feel bad because the artist Edu Valls gave me a really cool like picture of a clown on my box at Essen. He actually, and the designer signed the game as well. So I do feel slightly bad for this, but I gotta give it honest opinions. I just didn't find this to be that exciting, because it's like an engine builder game where you don't see the fruits of your engine until the end of the game. So there's no sense of ramping up. You put more stuff on your board, and if anything, you're nerfing yourself at times. So you're not ramping up, you're actually like falling down in some respects. But you get the setup and you go, this will be pretty cool. I can get a medium show done and it's nice, or at the end of the game I'm going to score a decent amount of points for this row. You just don't know what that's going to be until the end of the game. So during the game it's mostly just a little bit of area control with the acquisition of these cards, and on top of that it is very luck driven. I mean, you are drawing these ticket guys from a face-up display, but if the ones that you need for your point scoring don't come up, well then what are you supposed to do about it? The money cards are entirely random. They're drawn from a face-down deck, and you might want the acts to perform because of the symbols and you just don't get the symbols. But even worse, you might be thinking, well, you know what, I'm just going to use it to sell off so I can afford this performer. I hope it's a high value. Oh, it's only a 2 or a 3. I really could have done with a 4 or a 5 at this point. And again, it's entirely random. Even the endgame scoring goals, you can draw some of them and they're random. You might just draw into one that automatically gives you points, and the one that you have to work for, there's just not really much in the way of skill in the game. Most of it is just the cards just have too much of a swingy effect. The solo mode is fine. It's pretty straightforward. You basically just have an opponent that nicks cards off the display and fills up shows. But other than that, the solo mode is actually pretty easy to run through. But that didn't make it any more enjoyable. And it's not, I don't think the game is bad, but it just feels very dry and just kind of uneventful. I didn't get much excitement out of this, and I thought I would. The card mechanics aren't as interesting. I mean, it's mainly just putting them in sequence, which is not the most enticing thing in the world, but it's got beautiful production values. I mean, the art is nice. You've got these cool wooden big top tents and little caravans and stuff, and all these sort of things. I mean, if you're opposed to animals and circuses, which frankly this game is so abstracted, why would it bother you? But you can even get a solidarity deck which replaces the animal cards with a different sort of puppetry type card, just to appease those who want that. But I bought it at Essen actually by accident, thinking that when it said solidarity I thought it meant solo mode. Got suckered into that one, so that was €5 I'm not going to get back.
Stupid! You're so stupid!
Yeah, it's in the box if you want it, but I didn't bother with it. So yeah, Ring Circus just feels a bit like a dud really, and I'm seeing a lot of reports from other people that they think kind of the same. This is not the personal opinion. A lot of people are kind of finding this to be a bit of a dud. Certainly they prefer White Castle to this, and I prefer White Castle to this. So this one, I don't think it's terrible, it's just not overly exciting. I think a 5 out of 10 as well. It's average, does the job, but yeah, I mean, cheap at €30, I gotta say, it was cheap, and I do feel bad because I've got an illustrated thing in the lid, but it's just didn't work for me, didn't work. Alright, the Grand Carnival. This one is not an Essen release. I think it came out last year, maybe 2 years ago, I forget. But I have had this on my shelf of shame for so long. I've just not got round to playing this, and I'm sorry, I wish I'd gone there faster, but I've just had too much to play. And it was very difficult to convince Meeple to play it, because they didn't necessarily want to play another polyomino game. Although, there's a little bit of a twist here. I like the fact that the artwork has got that Cuphead style artwork, like the old 1930s cartoon thing. That's really cool, and there's not a lot of artwork in the game, but I do like that it uses it. It just gives you that nostalgic feeling. But it takes about an hour, 1 to 4 players, and the solo mode is fine, it does the job, although I quite like playing this with multiplayer, frankly. This is a polyomino game, but man, this is produced nicely. I mean, everybody gets their own player board with their place that they build, very good reference aids for like how you play each round and how you score at the end of the game. Fantastic. This is something I would like to see in more games. But the idea is that you are doing an action with various workers. So I won't get the workers out, but you basically have a worker to use for each of these action numbers 1 to 5. 3 actions you can do. You can grab more of these foundation tiles to play on your board. You can get ride attractions, which is the polyomino bit where they come in different shapes and sizes, and you can move guests through your carnival because the foundations have places to build attractions, but they also have the green grass walkways. So the guests have to go visit the rides in order to score for them at the end of the game, which is a cool twist. But the idea is that the value of the action you do is based on the number. So I have a tableau of cards that I can pick, tiles I can pick from. Well, if I do 5, I can take from any one I like, including the one at the far end. If I only do it at 1, though, I'm forced to draw blind from a deck. Maybe I want to save an action pawn for that. But then I also wanted to move that guest at least 3 spaces, so I need to save a 3, 4, or 5 for that. But then I also want to do this, and it's very tight. This is a, 7-round game, I think it is? I think it's 7 rounds, but, cool blimey. Even in 7 rounds, you're struggling to get as much as you would like done. It's definitely very action efficient here. But it's just a cool twist on polyomino games, which frankly are starting to get a little bit stale and we've seen it done a million times now. This one, yes, has the polyomino aspect, but you've got to build the foundations for where those rides go. You set it up, but then you've also got to leave the walkways so that guests can go through. If they get to your big top, it's worth bonus points, but they got to visit your ride, so you can't block them off. And, you got to get the right tiles, you've got to be able to get the right rides. There's only so many of them in a game. There'll be various shapes, so the perfect 4 square. If there's only one of them, yeah, better get it quick if you want it, because someone might take it. And people are constantly taking tiles that you want, so there's a lot of competition and turn angst. But the turns are very straightforward. I mean, it's literally written on your board. The turns take, like a second? A few seconds max to do a turn. Really, the only time this game drags is when people AP a bit, which they can happen. This does have a bit of an AP problem at times, especially when you have 4 of you playing, but 3 players was a good sweet spot. This would work brilliantly for 2. You can play it solo. I think adding more players doesn't really add a ton to the game because it does scale, but yeah, for 2 or 3 of you, this makes for a very good, interesting, more meaty polyomino game. One that's not quite as simplistic as something like Baron Park or what's the other one? The one I rave about? I forgot his name. Alice's Garden. It's not as simple as those. There's a bit more here, but the rules are still simple. And on top of that, you even get some tricks of the trade cards, so you can, if you meet the criteria, you get the first dibs on getting a special ability for the game. But once someone gets it, that's it. No one else can get it. So there's a bit of a race for these as well. It's just a cool, interesting game. Now, scoring-wise, I do find that getting guests to the big top just doesn't seem that worth it, frankly, compared to the rest of it points-wise. Getting a diverse amount of tile attractions or getting a set of them, I think, is more lucrative. Certainly having a decent amount of tickets for the big bonus is worth it. But yeah, I didn't really find it getting guests up to the big top was a massive deal, but maybe I could be proved wrong. So far it hasn't worked out as much for various people, but it's quite a small part of the scoring that I'm not too fussed, because most people are focusing on their board, particularly covering up the hammers, because every hammer is a negative point. Well, there's a smorgasbord of negative points already. I've just put a 3 hammers tile down. I've just basically increased my negative points. Yeah, better get a tile to cover it at some point soon, otherwise you're in trouble. But yeah, I found this one a very interesting game. It surprised a lot of people that I've shown it to. Produced well. It's a little tough to get it back in the box, I will admit. It certainly is. I mean, it's not even going to fit now, because I've just taken stuff out of it, so I'm going to have to rebuild this. But, oh well, like I say, that small blemish aside, this is quite cool. Rob Kramer, who publishes this one, actually? It doesn't actually say who the publisher is. Who's the publisher? Uproarious. We're serious about games. Completely forgot who it was, but yeah, this is an underrated title. Z Garcia really likes this, and I know Tom Vassell didn't like it, but I think this is quite a quirky game. I'd give it an 8 out of 10. It's a different twist with a more meaty version of a polyomino game that induces a bit more turn angst and a bit more agency with what you're doing, yet keeps it super simple. You know, that is a pretty cool combination. So 8 out of 10 for Grand Carnival. And finally, to round off this episode, oh my god. Pirates of Maracaibo. This is a standalone game based on the Maracaibo game that Alexander Pfister did a while back for, was it Capstone Games that did it? I forget. But, you know, Maracaibo, I reviewed it a while back, and I like it. I don't love it. It's got an interesting multi-card system in it, which I really love multi-card systems. So that bit I love. Didn't particularly like the whole exploring around the island. That just seemed really bare bones and dry. And the sort of, what was it called? Like the competition for the different fleets, the different flags. I found that a bit weird, but I enjoyed the freedom of movement around the map, the timer that was dictated by players, and also the multi-card system. That game was made for me by that. But still, 7 out of 10. It's got no real story, even with the campaign. It's like, people go, oh yeah, it's got a campaign with a story. Really? Do you honestly consider it to be a thematic story? No, but I digress. Pirates of Maracaibo, I was kind of hesitant on it first, thinking, oh well, it's just another Maracaibo game, but it's a standalone game. So yes, it uses the same like designer and the same iconography and the same styling, but it is still its own game, and it is very different to Maracaibo in most respects. The idea being that everybody has a ship with a lot of these different little bonuses on it, and these you can upgrade during the game, and they give you all sorts of different things, but you're not going to get them all, so you can kind of tailor your strategy how you like. But the premise of this is, oop, they're starting to fall out everywhere, is you essentially have these cards, and these cards represent the map. So you build the map at the start of the game, which, oh, blimey, this game has a long setup. Setup and for this is a bit of a chore, and you're going to need a lot more table space than you think you will with a game this big. It takes up a lot of space. But the idea is that everybody has a ship, and you have to move your ship forwards up a certain amount of spaces, but you must keep going forwards. Even if you go up and down this column, you must at least move forwards, like closer to Maracaibo or wherever it is you're going to. And the idea is that this represents the map of the Caribbean. So some of these are locations where you can put residences down. Some of them are islands where you can get special abilities, go raiding for treasure. Some of them are improvements, so that when you buy them, they're worth points, but they give you a special bonus for the rest of the game. And as you go to these places, they remove and replace with a stronger one from the deck. So the map evolves as you go through the game. Once you get to the end of the board at Maracaibo itself, I think it's Maracaibo or the Gulf or whatever they call it, yeah, when you get there, the round effectively resets and goes back and you do it twice more. But when the round ends, it's kind of dictated on how fast people go. If everybody's going nice and slow, the round's going to take a little while. But if someone starts speeding towards the end, gets to the end, you kind of got like a 2-turn warning that the round is going to end. Because they'll get to Maracaibo, trigger an action, and then you know that the next round is going to be the last one. So you kind of know a little bit in advance. It's not quite so abrupt, but there is that. And it's quite a cool game for engine building, because you get to kind of choose your own strategy, and there's a multitude of things you can do. I mean, you can go heavy exploration, which is again a boring track around a board, but hey, it is what it is. You've got, you know, different quests that you can do, like get the criteria, get the points, which is quite hard to do a lot of those quests, and it is kind of luck driven how you get them. But then you've got like grabbing a bunch of the improvements is worth points, putting the residences down is more in-game scoring, getting the treasure is worth a variable amount of points depending on how many that turn up, but you can bury them for potentially additional points, but more bonuses. So there's a lot of variety in the game, and I gotta give it props for that. There's even a solo mode where you go up against an AI who moves around and starts, you know, nicking stuff and getting in your way, which I quite enjoyed as well. Although the problem with the solo mode is that some of the stuff remains too stagnant. The quest cards, you only have 2 of them as a face-up display, and they don't shift that much. So you may be gunning for stuff that the quest cards just don't support, and so you're kind of screwed in that respect. But the AI is also pretty hard. I mean, cool blimey, there's tailorable difficulty in here. But you could go fairly easy and still have the AI completely like ram you like for sideways. Yeah, and I think the typical thing with Alexander Pfister is I think he does tend to do quite hard solo modes in here. This is no exception, and it is a little bit off-putting to have an AI beat you down relentlessly even on easy mode. You know, it should be easy on easy. If I want to have a sadistic, AI come at me with everything it's got, then fine, I'll go on hell mode in Ghost Stories or something, or I'll play White Castle. But the fact that it's so hard here, and mostly it's just the fact that it just accumulates far too many points. And even then, where it goes on the map is pretty random. I mean, you have some idea of where it can, but you flip a card from an AI deck, you don't know whether it's going to go to an exploration lane or a raidy party. It depends entirely on what the map looks like. The map might just focus it entirely in one area, and it will do better than you at that area if it does. I'm going really fast on the exploration track. Ah, well, there's a bunch of exploration islands, and the AI is just going to each one, move 6, move 6, move 6, and it's overtaking you. It's a little bit punishing in that regard. But with multiplayer, it's a good laugh, but it is quite long. I mean, it says 25 minutes a player. It's not any shorter than that, I can tell you that. And it's certainly, although 25 minutes, you will not get a solo mode of this done in 25 minutes. I mean, hell, it'll take you that long just to set the wretched thing up. You're talking a good hour to play this game, but this can drag to a good 2 hours if you have 4 of you in it, and it's like, it's a bit long for what it is. I really wanted this to be more of a 90-minute game, and granted, some of that is dictated by the players. I mean, some players can drag the game out to endless levels, and some could just rush it in a short space of time, but I don't want to drag it on, because dragging it on makes it outstay its welcome, and I don't want it to be too short because it takes so long to set the thing up that I don't want it to be over too quickly. So there's some stuff I like in here, and I do like the bonuses. I like the freedom to upgrade your ship how you like. I like the solo mode being relatively straightforward, although learning the game with the solo mode on top was a bit of a chore for me. But, it's an interesting game, and certainly one that I would like to try and play some more. But God, that setup is a chore. I mean, this is kind of one that I would almost like to solely play on, say, Tabletop Simulator with a script. So every time somebody moves to a card, it automatically swaps it with another card, and it can do the setup at the beginning of the game. I mean, I haven't checked to see if there's a TTS mod for Pirates of Maracaibo, but if somebody does a scripted mod of this, they're going to be very popular in the TTS world, because I think this game is just crying out for a TTS or even a Board Game Arena BGA implementation, because it would just save a lot of the fiddly faff that you have to do with the cards and the setup and the table space. But all in all, it's a fine game. I just don't think it's amazing, but I do prefer this one to Maracaibo. I think I'd rather play this one for a simpler, more, a simpler game that still gives me that sense of engine building and variety. So I'll give this one a 7 out of 10. I think it's a solid game. It's good. I'd endorse it, but I don't think it's quite like a mega game. I think people are going to sort of gloss past this one. If they didn't like Maracaibo, they're probably going to ignore it, and it does have some similarities to Maracaibo, but it is still a different game, so you can like one and not the other, I feel. But yeah, it's a decent game, just not anything mind-blowing. Whew. And with my throat in tatters, that is it. So yes, finally, that was a lot of games. And can you imagine if I tried to do a video for each of those? Not gonna happen. There is just too much I've got to do. So I'm going to rest my voice, no more talking for the rest of the day. I'm going to get on with editing another video that I need to in there. But for the rest of the day, I think I'm probably going to play a couple of little solo games. I've got Anno 1800, which I got in a Brin and Buy, very cheap, £15, that I've not played the solo mode for, so I might want to try that. And I've got the Ashes Reborn, what do you call it, Frost Scourge and Red Rain or whatever, like the Red Rain sets. Somebody on Paul Grogan's video convinced me to buy these after I enjoyed the previous version of Ashes Phoenixborn, but couldn't really play it with other players. Well, now I can play it solo. Does that mean the game's going to resurrect for me? We shall see, but that is for another time. It's not a review copy. This is my own personal thing that I'm doing. So thank you for tuning in for this video. I'm going to sign off there. If you like what you see, then please thumb it up on YouTube, and by all means let me know in the comments what you think about any of these games. Do you love them? Do you hate them? Do you agree or disagree? These are speedy reviews of these games, and hopefully there's something in here that takes your fancy. So take care, and remember, as always, it's only a game. Bye for now, everyone.